and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one-stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought-provoking conversations. India and the United States this early morning issued a joint statement on the long-awaited trade deal between the two nations, shedding light on the terms of the agreement addressed by both countries. Now, this move comes after high-level negotiations between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump. Now, Union Minister Piyush Goyal held a press conference and he said that there will be several items which will be subject to a zero tariff rate in the United States as part of the trade deal. Now, what does this joint statement entail, or rather, what does this US trade deal look like? As per the new agreement, the United States will apply a reciprocal tariff rate of 18% on all Indian exports to the Western nation in exchange for India reducing or eliminating tariffs on certain imports from America. Now, the interim agreement between India and US lowers tariffs on several Indian items, including textiles and apparel, leather and footwear, plastics and rubber, organic chemicals, home decor, artisanal products, and certain machinery. Now, I'm going to quote a certain portion from this American statement. It says, subject to the successful conclusion of the interim agreement. That means it's not legally binding. Understand the language which has been written as part of this joint statement. I'm repeating it. Subject to the successful conclusion of the interim agreement, US will remove reciprocal tariffs on a wide range of goods, including generic pharmaceuticals, gems and diamonds, and aircraft parts. Now, US, on the other hand, gets zero tariffs on its exports in sectors including food and agricultural products, including dried distillers' grains, red sorghum for animal feed, tree nuts, fresh and processed fruits, soybean oil, wine, and spirits. Now, both countries committed to providing each other with preferential market access in sectors of mutual interest on a sustained basis, and to establishing rules of origin to ensure that the benefits of the agreement accrue primarily to the United States and India. Now, the opposition has lambasted this joint statement. Opposition says that this is not a joint statement, but it is a treaty of surrender. Opposition says it's not a master stroke, but it's a bundle of mistakes. In fact, many opposition leaders have also pointed out that there should be a threadbare discussion on this joint statement. It should be discussed it should undergo a parliamentary scrutiny. But the best part was when Piyush Goyal was conducting the press conference today, and one of the reporters asked him about the Russian oil, because that still remains the gray area. If you look at Section 4 of the White House statement, it clearly says that India cannot directly or indirectly buy Russian oil. And if it does, then we will reimpose the 25% tariff on India. So that is the gray part of the White House statement, and which is why the opposition is saying that it looks like a complete surrender. So we'll try and decode this joint statement. Joining me this evening is Professor Gulshan Sachdeva. He's from the Center for European Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. We have Sanjay Kapoor, who's international affairs expert and veteran journalist, also joins us. And I'm also hoping to be joined by Pushpraj Deshpande, who's the author and the policy expert. And before I begin the discussion, I would like to put out a tweet which was written by Jairam Ramesh. And if we have the tweet ready, we can play it out for the viewers. Now look at the statement given by Jairam Ramesh on the X. He says, Commerce Minister's defense of the India-US deal from the point of view of Indian farmers is too clever by half. First, the statement has something called additional products that are not specified. This is far too open-ended and shows something is being hidden. Second, the statement says that India has agreed to address long-standing barriers to the trade in US food and agricultural products. What does this mean, if not removal of restrictions on GM crops and dairy products? Third, much is being made on how cheaper imports of DDGS from America will benefit India, but DDGS is derived from GM corn. It is nothing but backdoor entry. Fourth, lakhs of soybean farmers in Maharashtra, MP, and Rajasthan will be hit by imports of DDGS and soybean oil. There will be undoubtedly more concerns as fuller details are revealed. Now, this is what Jairam Ramesh has written. So we'll try and understand this joint statement. And I'll begin with Professor Gulshan Sachdeva. Also joins us on the broadcast is Pushparaj Deshpande, policy expert and author. Thank you so much, Pushparaj, for joining. And let me begin with Professor Sachdeva. How would you look at this joint statement? Do you think in the real term it is a win-win situation for India, or you feel that India has given way too many concessions, but it is tight-lipped about it? Because given the fact the kind of political backlash which has been there around this deal, do you think that India is really tight-lipped about the granular details?
Well, it's difficult to say at the moment because still we do not know many things. In fact, we know very little. Broadly, if I look at the way things, I mean, we have been talking about this deal for the last couple of days, and now things are unfolding slowly. Now we have this joint statement, which is kind of a moving towards an interim agreement, and that interim agreement will lead to bilateral trade agreement, and even after that trade agreement both countries will continue to talk about tariff reductions. It has given certain numbers about tariffs and products, and it also talks about non-tariff barriers. It also talks about market access. It also talks about certain sensitivities from both sides. And then we also have a separate, statement from the president's office about linking this deal with the Russian oil. So if I look at very academically what it is now, yes, we had this, that there was a downturn in the Indo-US relations in the last 1 year. Apart from many other issues, you also had tariff, which created a lot of problems. And that was one of the issues, basically. And as a result of this tariff, because US is still a very important market for India, Indian exports, and even for otherwise, and like for anybody else. So many other countries were able to make a deal. Starting with UK with 10%, and then we had Japan and the EU with 15%, and everybody else, in our neighborhood between 15 to 20%. So our exporters are facing difficulties, particularly on certain products which are labor-intensive products. Obviously, we also didn't have the, I would say, capacity to retaliate like the Chinese did. So we were kind of trying to wait it out, and maybe some back channels were working between both the government. And finally, now something has happened. So at least there is some relief for those,
No, but you are talking
exporters.
about political. Are you looking at a political relief, or is it really
No, 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 I'm
something?
not. No, no, no.
Yes,
The political things are different. I mean, I'm saying particularly for those exports,
right.
those had difficulties in entering because, you had a 50% tariff and some of your competitors had now between 50 to 20%, or maybe so somewhere, they thought that, they'll not be able to continue exporting to US, and that will have impact on their industries and labor and everything else. So for those industries, there's this some relief, and that's what the government is actually kind of projecting that's what we have been able to achieve. And the second major point which the government so far has been projecting is that there has been a allegation on us that we have been opening our Indian market to basically agriculture products from the US, which they have been pushing, but we have been able to protect some of our agriculture products. Some we have opened, which still, I mean, the full details, of course, are not there. So yes, I mean, so broadly this is, but so we will only be able to assess in the overall scenario when we have at least the interim deal where some number details are there. And I think the Commerce Minister also made clear that it's as President Trump had claimed in his tweets that all our industrial products will go to enter Indian market to zero something, and even agriculture products. He said no, we will have not everything will be on zero, but there will be reduced tariff. There will also be quotas. Now all the details are still not there. He's just saying these things, but hopefully, since ministry is claiming, I think the fact is they're still negotiating. So that's why he cannot really even reveal many of those things because he may not
Right.
even have that full details with him.
Hmm.
But the problematic part is really linking this. I mean, these are, of course, and another thing also I would like to make a point that these are not really normal trade negotiation which every country is doing now with the US.
Hmm.
Everybody know how things are working at the moment under Trump in the US. So you have to uh, you don't really expect this fair kind of balance, those kind of deals which you will have in normal circumstances. Here things are. I mean, it's important market. Strategically, politically, US is important. So you want to kind of restore certain kind of normalcy relations with the US. But yes, but at the same time, apart from the trade issue, we also continue to believe in our strategic autonomy. So in that sense, there is a problem because yes, I mean, we can open certain market, they can open market, tariff negotiation, etc. will happen. But how do you really link up with oil buying? And we know that, in the last 2, 3 months, the numbers have gone down, from 40%. We are buying roughly about something around 20% or so. It
Right.
may go down further depending on the circumstances. And, we are not violating anything. Another thing is, only except two companies, Russian companies, other companies are not under any kind of sanctions. And we were even buying below the price, even which was kind of set by the European Union itself. So there's no UN sanctions per se in that sense. So, so how do we are able to link this? I think still the government has to come out with its own explanation and more, just not just only linking with this. The problem is also there'll be also be monitoring, and if you
All right.
start buying again, then again they can come out with it. So these are the bit of a problematic thing that I think the government has to answer many of those queries. How do
Right.
they really, and
But
what do they believe? I mean,
yes.
rather than just yeah.
Right. In fact, you are saying that there's total lack of clarity about many aspects. I'll come to Sanjay now. Sanjay, how do you see this joint statement? And coming at it, as it does, it comes from White House. Like last time, also when the trade deal was announced that the trade deal has been finalized, it's Donald Trump who announces it, and then Prime Minister Modi endorses it. Similarly, the similar was the case with the joint statement that White House issues a statement, then Piyush Goyal puts out a tweet. What would you really say to that? Is it really a joint statement in the real sense?
It doesn't smell like a joint statement because I think the basic draft has come from the US. Like in us, part of the statement, we don't talk about the Russian oil, which is the core of the entire issue. In fact, that is the touchstone of how we actually perform when it comes to the estimation of the United States of America and how we deal with the Russians. So it gives us certain kind of freedom to mess around if we are not, if we haven't really committed, because rather cleverly India hasn't really done very much in terms of making commitments to United States of America. And prior to that, we had the European mother of all deals, and you also had done some kind of restoration of trade with China. So we aren't so badly off as it were earlier. In fact, India could take a tougher stand on this rather than what they have done at the moment. But the truth is that the entire Indian industry is aligned with the US, and US wants greater alignment with more so in the coming days, so that they can get about $500 billion in the next 5 years, $100 billion per year. And that alignment is something that they really want, so that they can really uh, grow their, or they can expand their entire empire in the US, in India. So these are worrying things because it will mean losing a certain amount of strategic autonomy. So India has to be cognizant about it, and there is also the political aspect of it, that India hasn't really discussed the deal. In fact, as Pushparaj pointed out in an earlier program, that India could have discussed this in the parliament session. This is a matter which is not just economics or trade; it is far greater, far more compelling rather than what is made out to be. In fact, it changes the very nature of Indian economy and the politics also that rides on that. So I think there are far greater issues that are riding on what the US has done, US has done, and more so when it comes to our relationship with the Russia, which is very precious. You know, Russia has stood by us through thick and thin, and in fact, if we decide to discontinue buying oil from them, there has to be a reason, because if that is done, then we could say run into a problem which we don't even understand, and India has to explain to the Russia how we are doing that. And in fact, we have been put on some kind of parole that if we show that we have violated it in the coming days, we will be punished in a certain way, and there will be restoration of the penalty that has been imposed on us in the last few months. So I think there is a great amount of freedom that India get as a bound man. This is the freedom of a bound man, because if they really want to do it, we have to be clever and we have to be sharp, and Mr. Modi, in a certain way, and his government needs to do that if they want to save India from becoming a slave economy.
Right. I'll come to Pushpraj now. Pushpraj, do you think that this deal has enough clarity, or this joint statement is just a misleading statement, which where things aren't very clear? Pushpraj, are you there?
He comes
Okay.
and he goes.
Right. Okay. So we'll wait for Pushpraj to come back. But coming to you, Professor Sachdeva, now what happens now? Because everything is subject to conditions. Uh, it doesn't look like a proper joint statement, but it looks like a vision document, which has a lot of uncertainty. Whether this clause will be complete or not, whether the other clause will be finalized or not. So is it also a probability that before the final signing of the deal is done, maybe both sides could backtrack from a lot of things?
Well, I mean, till the time you do not have the final deal, you don't have the final deal. So, but I think there is looks like, I mean, there is now a political kind of willingness to get this deal done. And the way I think the United States is, the administration is behaving, obviously they would like to push many things. You know, this is a chance they feel that to really get into the Indian market. And here, in fact, the worry for me is, I mean, if I look at not really about certain tariffs and, this product or that product. I mean, that I think our bureaucrats are good enough to negotiate reasonably good deal. I mean, depending on the circumstances. But how do we really open up our market for services? How do we open up for our market for yet to be invented services? On the data exclusivity, on the digital trade, and these are the things in which actually the future economic partnership, future economic dependencies will really be built. So it's not just only certain goods and agriculture goods come out. In agriculture, yes, it's important in the Indian context, but in the overall global scene, I mean, agriculture is not really such that you should really worry too much. But uh, the many other things, what kind of access, what kind of market access, what kind of exclusivity, what kind of services. I mean, that I think still, I mean, those things are simply not clear, because here they're just intention of doing those things. Both are looking market access into each other markets. How those details would really, I mean, those are the details I'm more
Right.
interested.
In fact, you're
Then,
talking
because
about
I mean, I think few
yes,
products India will definitely will say, okay, we
right.
will not, allow this something, but other things
I want to
are
play
really.
out for the viewers. I want to play out for the viewers the section 4 of the White House statement, because and you will see certain lines with a red pen, and that clearly talks about the Russian oil, the purchase of Russian oil, where they have said, and this is called section 4, where they are talking about monitoring and recommendations. Basically, they are saying that we are watching you and we shall monitor you if India resumes directly or indirectly importing the Russian Federation oil. And in the last line, which you see, I'm not reading out the whole thing, which says that the duty, the ad valorem rate of duty of 25% on imports of articles of India can be reimposed if New Delhi buys Russian oil directly or indirectly. Now, I'll come to Pushparaj now. Pushparaj, do you see this as a joint statement, as some kind of an order given by Donald Trump? That's what opposition is saying, that it looks like a complete surrender and it is an order which has been dictated by the White House. Yes, Pushparaj, just unmute yourself. Yeah. Pushparaj, can you hear me? Pushparaj, am I audible to you?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's some connectivity issue. Okay, Sanjay, so I'll come to you with this question and then again I'll go back to Professor Sachdeva. I think Pushpraj is again. Okay. Pushpraj is back. So I was asking you that this joint statement, does it look like an order dictated by the White House? That's what the opposition is also saying. It looks like a complete treaty of surrender. Yes, Pushpraj.
Sorry for the glitches, Neeluji, and very good evening to our panelists and our viewers. See, firstly, let us get some things clear. This is not a deal or an agreement. In international terms, a deal agreement is very different from a framework. This is a interim framework, right? So it basically lays down broad principles and a vision on what we are going to do towards in the future. So I would strongly recommend that the BJP government temper its exuberance from labeling this as the father of all deals and so on and so forth. The finer details are still yet to be fleshed out. That's the first thing. The second thing is that whatever details have come, there is very different statements from the Indian side, from the Trump administration. Obviously, for whatever reason, the Trump administration is much more granular about the details. The Modi administration, for whatever reason, is not. The what we need to understand is, from the limited information that we have currently, the Modi government has agreed to an 18% tariff on US on Indian products going to the US, but a 0% tariff on American products coming into US. Now, this is obviously very tilted towards that. Now, as a former advisor to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has pointed out, under the UPA regime, after the nuclear deal, the average tariff regime was 2.93%. The Vajpayee regime, even after the sanctions, after the nuclear deal, the average tariff deal was less was 3.31%. So the fact of the matter is that the BJP government is celebrating a 15.07% increase in tariffs over and above what was happening before 2014. Furthermore, they've also talked about this comparative misery theory, that the others have it worse than, and we are sort of better off in this. And they've pointed to Vietnam, China, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and so on and so forth, saying that they have tariffs between 20 and 34%. What they're forgetting is that many of these nations, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and others, have a special generalized system of preferences where they get an additional 5% sort of cut. So the fact of the matter is that you can't compare the two. Furthermore, these countries also have many structural advantages when it comes to trade. They have greater FDI, they have deeper supply lines, they also have much better manufacturing hubs, all of which the Modi government has not been able to do in the last 11 years. I mean, keeping aside the fact that Make in India is now officially consigned to the dustbin of history. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is that this Russian oil thing, where they have zeroed out from Russian imports. Now, frankly speaking, already we were papering off from Russian imports, partly because if you see in the last quarter of 2025, we were importing about 36% of our total oil imports from Russia. That has dropped to, in Jan 2026, it has dropped to 9%. And this is partly because of the fact that the oil dividend, that the cheaper oil dividend that we were getting, has sort of papered off. We're getting a better deal from Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and eventually Venezuela also, presumably. So already that tapering off has happened. But there is a principle of sovereignty here. The Modi government has outsourced its sovereignty, and this is the third time after that it has buckled under US pressure. The first time was when it said that you do in 2019, when it said don't get oil from Iran. The second time was Venezuela, and now Russia. Now, in stark contrast, and I want to take you back in history, if you look at the PL 480 program in 1965, where India had suffered a war, we were with Pakistan. Two monsoons we had failed in India. There was crippling famine that was debilitating India. At that time, Indira Gandhi and the United States had stopped the PL 480 scheme, providing food grains to India, cheap food grains to India, because India had stood for Vietnam in the Vietnam War. Indira Gandhi did not go with a begging bowl to America. She rapidly made India self-sufficient in food. Of course, it took time. Norman Borlaug and others came in. The Green Revolution happened, so on and so forth. And in 5 years, India was self-sufficient enough to split Pakistan into two by 6 years, by 1971. Look at instead what the Prime Minister Modi has done, right? I don't understand why he's compromising our sovereignty and self-interest so rapidly. That's the fourth point. The fifth point, the trade deal also talks about the fact that over the next 5 years, we are going to have to buy $500 billion worth of goods from America. That in today's terms, it constitutes to 45.5 lakh crores, right? Now, the fact of the matter is, people say that no, no, it's spread over 5 years. Today, our trade deal between America and India is about $132.3 billion, of which our share, right, is 46.5 billion. You are basically saying that you're going to increase this by another 460 billion dollars over the next 5 years. That effectively means that you're adding $100 billion every year to our trade deficit, or you are having to compromise trading with other nations. Either way, if it's the first thing, you're going to our trade deficit is going to $363 billion per year. That's the fifth point. And the last point, with regard to what you said earlier, you are refusing to talk to Parliament. I don't understand how this government is repeatedly announcing critical deals on social media, how you are refusing to actually brief Parliament, allowing the opposition to have a say, allowing the leader of opposition to speak. And this is actually violative of parliamentary sovereignty. And there are people who have
So
argued that
how
no,
do
no,
you
in the,
think,
the
Shraj,
one
just
second,
allow
Neeluji,
me
let
to
me finish
ask
this
you,
point.
right?
Let me just finish this point. There are people who have argued that no, parliament, trade deals are not discussed in parliament. No, in the UPA 2, the ASEAN deal, the Korea India FTA, the WTO Doha round of initiatives were all discussed in parliament in July and June and July 2005, and July and August 2009, and the WTO, of course, between 12 and so on and so forth. In the Vajpayee 1 regime also, if you remember, there was a Sri Lanka India FTA. There was also a SAFTA, the South Asia FTA, which was also discussed in Parliament once in 1998 and once in 2003. So there are clear precedents in under Prime Minister Vajpayee as well as Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. How can you then now say that you're not going to discuss this? And the larger point, on one hand, when you ask the commerce minister, will you tell us if we are actually papering off, zeroing off on Russian oil? He says, I don't know, ask Dr. Jaishankar. When you ask
Yes.
Dr. Jaishankar, the external affairs minister, will you tell us about the energy deal, about the US India trade deal? He said, I don't know, ask the commerce minister. Is this a government or a Panwadi ki dukan? How does the left hand not know what the right hand is doing? I mean, this is
Right.
ridiculous.
So,
And then
I'll
on top of that, the prime minister is claiming this is the father of all deals. I don't
Right.
understand
I'll
how you're
ask
like
you,
claiming
I
this.
want to ask you another question, Pushpraj, and then I'll go for the concluding comments to Sanjay and Professor Sachdeva. That how do you think that the opposition will now be taking up this issue, given the fact that there's a lot of opacity, there's total lack of clarity about the contours of this deal. We do have a sense that the deal hasn't been finalized, and the government is tight-lipped about certain things, irrespective of the fact that what the compelling factors are. Not to forget what's happening on Epstein files, not to forget what's happening on Adani. There are several factors on which we can speculate. But how do you think now that the opposition is going to pick up this issue coming Monday when the House reconvenes?
Let me be very clear here. The parliament, the opposition, the India Alliance, represents 60% of India's electorate. 60%. It is their legal and moral responsibility to raise this issue because it is going to directly impact crores of Indians. Let me explain why. Although the finer details are not available right now, I know for a fact that under Section 262 of the US Act, steel, aluminium are already not exempt from this entire thing because they don't get exempt with even if with the general FTA. So the fact of the matter, these sectors are going to continue to have tariffs of 25% to 50%. That's one thing. Secondly, leather, textile, agricultural products, MSME, and pharma sector are all going to be adversely hit. Given this, the parliament, the opposition has a responsibility to debate these issues, get clarity from the government of India, because frankly speaking, it is our government. We need to get answers from the government. It does not behoove the government to outsource this responsibility to the US administration. It is so ironic that today we are told about critical issues facing India, geopolitical, economic, energy security issues, from the US administration and President Trump rather than from our own government. I'm not understanding. Is this a government of, by, and for our people, our Indian people, or for the Americans? And the way the deal is constituted, given the fact that it's not sort of the well defined and so forth, so on and so forth, it at least today it seems as if the deal makes America great again. It does not
Right.
create an Viksit or an Atmanirbhar Bharat. So yes, the opposition is going to ask firm questions, but you and I can have a bet. Our panelists can also join in if you want to have a friendly wager. The minute the opposition leader, the leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi or leader of opposition Khargeji are going to yes the US trade deal on Monday, the speaker and the chairperson of the house are going to switch off the mics and say the house is adjourned. They can't keep doing this.
Right, but I want to come to Professor Sajdeva on the point that you just mentioned, that this joint statement looks more about making India great again. I want you to reflect on this a little and very briefly, and then I'll come for the concluding comments to Sanjay. Yes, Professor Sajdeva.
No, no, I don't think this, statement, making great any country in a sense. There's a kind of a intention of both the countries to get certain things moving and get, integrating these economies more. Now, I think my feeling is that as the government, I do not know what the government's policies and the government strategy is, but obviously they would knew that this was still being negotiated. Still, this is not a final deal. I mean, many things are still under negotiation. It will take some time, so there was no need for them to really hype it the way actually they did. What they should have really done, that we had a talk with the President Trump had talk with the Prime Minister. They had agreed on certain things. And under this, the first kind of thing that, we had immediate problems with the, certain sectors. So those sectors we have kind of, we have got certain relief for that. And rest we are negotiating, and we will make sure that, our farmers and etc. are not really, kind of adversely affected. And these are difficult circumstances, but we will try to make it a best out of this, and we'll have a good deal. And then, as and when the deal was final, then of course they should have really come out to the parliament to at least, of course, I mean, in Indian conditions there's no need to have a ratification from the parliament. Of course they can also get even ratification because they have majority anyway, but there's no need because these are executive decisions. But at least since the like parliament was on, and it's always good to kind of brief little bit that this is what we have done. And of course opposition will always raise certain questions. That's what they are for. So then there is no harm in discussing, because ultimately, the nation interests are. So again, the problem now would be that since these things are coming more from the US, one is that, and they're very clearly written now about the, Russian oil, etc. And, and Russians also would be watching very, very carefully. I mean, of course, we
Yes,
can reduce it. And we are also vulnerable to Russians in a many ways. I mean, particularly the defense sector,
absolutely.
and
In fact,
even
it's a
the
very
and
significant
many
point
of
that
not just only the oil, because as a result of the oil which we
right.
were buying for the last for a year, 2 years now, a lot of other connectivity projects which we were talking with Russians for many, many years, they could have become viable. Whether we are talking about, of course, now even the because of there are now even the we have not even now investing even in the Chabahar port. So many of those things are very problematic. So we are linking many of those things just with the trade deal, which still we really do not know what that final trade deal would be, what the
Right.
benefit we will get
Absolutely.
out of this. So these are, I think, difficult questions which the government has a lot of answering to do.
Right, and the government hasn't answered even the minimalistic bit, Sanjay. But coming to the point of the our relationship with Russia, the point which Professor Sajdeva mentioned, does this joint statement then end up jeopardizing India's relationship with Russia as well?
Yeah, Neelu, everything has been discussed by Professor Sachdeva and the Pushpraj, so I'll just confine myself to the Russian thing. There are about 6,700 Naira petrol pumps, which are largely in the rural areas. He was talking about a network. So Naira is actually fed by Rosneft and owned by Rosneft. And, Naira refinery is the one that provides it. How do you shut them down? What do you do? How do you take them over? These are things that are real issues. These are issues on the ground. So India will have to be very watchful. They can't agree with everything the Americans are asking us to do. Although before the Ukraine war started off, we were buying just 1 to 2% of the oil from Russia. But after that, the economy has changed. Everything has changed thereafter. And even the refineries have been tailored to refine the Russian oil, which is heavy. The Ural is heavy, and we're doing that. So if you decide to change, then it'll be a major blow to all the network that we have created, the oil that has been supplied by Naira petrol pumps, and it can't happen just like that. I think at some stage India has to deal properly. He has to deal with a firm hand rather than just give in to whatever the US is saying. Thank you.
And just one more point. I mean, even when we are buying
Yes.
actually from from Venezuela, except I think Reliance, no other company has capacity to refine
Refine
the
it.
very refined particular Venezuelan oil, unless it is being first refined in the US and then you get it. Uh, so it's I mean it's very difficult because we have, and as a result of this, we also have very good exports of petroleum products now in the last 2 3 years. So there are larger issues which perhaps trade deal per se one can just discuss, but when linking up with other oil and Russia and something, that is what which is really worrying as far as these things are concerned.
Right. So
Thank
all
you.
eyes now will be in March when this deal is signed, and what are going to be the final contours? What would it look like? We'll have to wait and watch. Thank you so much, Professor Sachdeva, Sanjay Kapoor, Pushparaj. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you.